Shields up, Iron Breakers. Rurikhan here coming at you with another video, and today I'm going to be bringing you my beginner's guide for Lords of the Fallen. This title was sent to me by CI Games so that I could give it a look and tell you guys my opinions on it and naturally create some content around the new Lords of the Fallen game. So anyway, let's get things started. One of the first things that I want to bring to your attention is going to be the game's UI. You will notice that we have distinct UI elements spread throughout the four corners of the screen. We're going to be starting by taking a look at the top left-hand side. The very first gauge that you see on red is going to be your health pool. So that is fairly bog standard, as with most games, right? You got your health in there. That means that whenever you take damage, health goes down, and then if it goes down all the way, you are going to die. Except in Lords of the Fallen, that's not quite true, because you see there's two realms in Lords of the Fallen. The one that we are in right now is Axiom. You can see it because it has, like, warm colors. And then there's another realm called Umbral. And if you are in Axiom and you die, you get sent to Umbral, which looks a little bit like this. So this would pretty much be what happens when you die. Now you will notice, if you pay attention to your health pool once again, that half of your health pool is now grayed out. What exactly does that mean? That is a mechanic specific to Lords of the Fallen that is called Withered damage. Now, Withered damage is recoverable health. And how do you recover it? You attack enemies. Now, luckily, when you are in the Umbral Realm, and I will talk more about the Umbral Realm a little bit further ahead in the video, but when you are in the Umbral Realm, you're constantly going to have enemies spawn in to attack you. That's just the way that it goes. Sometimes they take a little bit longer, sometimes they come in a little bit faster. It all depends, but suffice it to say, the longer you remain in the Umbral Realm, the higher the chances are that enemies are going to be spawning in just to come and attack you. Now, like I said, that portion of gray health on your character is going to be recoverable so long as you attack enemies. I was hoping that an enemy would spawn here, but they didn't. Oh, here we go. This one's going to spawn. Okay, so notice that our health, we currently have that red bit and we have a bunch of gray. So if I attack, gray recovers, right? Let's do that again. Gray recovers. Now the problem is, if you get hit while you still have gray health, you lose all of it in addition to how much health you would have lost anyway. So keep that in mind. That is a specific mechanic, which is wither damage. There are going to be a lot of times that you're going to be taking wither damage, like for instance if you happen to be blocking or anything like that, you take wither damage as well, which again, just remember, it is recoverable so long as you attack your enemies without actually getting hit. Somewhat similar to the regain mechanic in Bloodborne. The main difference is there actually is no time limit. See, in Bloodborne, if you were to get hit, you could attack back at your enemy and recover a little bit of health. But that health, that recoverable health, would go away after a while, and here it doesn't unless you get hit. But anyways, that's your health pool. That's like the basics of your health pool, and a little bit about the Umbral Realm. Now, the gauge immediately below that is going to be your stamina gauge. This one is, again, fairly standard for Souls-like games. It regulates how many actions you can actually perform at any given time. So if you attack, that's going to use up some stamina. If you roll, that's also going to be using up some stamina. If you run, that is going to be using up some stamina. If you block attacks from your enemies, that is going to be using up some stamina. Even if you perfect parry your enemies, which is a mechanic that I will explain as well, it will also use up your stamina. So it is important to keep up with that stat. Always pay attention not to run out of stamina in the middle of action, otherwise you're going to be regretting it. Now, immediately below our stamina gauge, you will find a gauge that has a couple of divisions on it, and that is our ammunition gauge. See, in this game, you basically have ranged attacks, and ranged attacks can be a wide variety of things. It can be like, oh, I equip a bow and arrow, that's a ranged attack. I equip a thrown weapon, like you can, like for instance, I have these hatchets that I can throw. That's a ranged attack as well. And as you can see, whenever I throw one of my hatchets, that consumes 2 ammunition. If you notice, some of those ammunition gauges are in gray, the other ones are in yellow. Yellow is how many ammunition you will use for the specific weapon that you have equipped, because different weapons consume more or less ammunition. Well, like I said, I am using this throwable hatchet. That is pretty much the extent of my ranged attacks, but if you happen to equip something like, say, a spell focus, which I will do right now just for an example, you can then equip up to 4 spells. Unfortunately, I only have 1, and you will see that the gauge changes over to a mana gauge. So depending on what you have equipped, that gauge is going to change. Personally, this is something that I really like. I'll talk more about that whenever I talk about my first impressions of the game in another video. But, you know, you can also equip marksman crossbows and then use radiant bolts. These radiant bolts, as you can see, will actually use up to, 3 ammo instead of just 2, like my hatchet. So, you know, that's just the gauge that you need to keep in tabs in terms of, whenever it comes to using your ranged stuff. You can also regain ranged ammunition by using an item from your inventory, which would be the ammunition pouch. If you are using spells, you also have something to recover that using mana stone clusters, but you know, those are the basics of that. Now, immediately below the ammunition gauge, you will find the Soulflay gauge. That is related to specific mechanics for your lantern. Those little blue balls that you... blue balls. Yes, I'm a child. Those little blue orbs that you have there in the bottom, they tell you how many times you can use a specific lantern mechanic, which is the Soulflay, which I'll talk more about in the video a little bit later. And then at the very top of that element, you'll see that there's 2 little icons. Those are your current active buffs. Now, the buff on the left is actually something that I socketed into my lantern, and currently I don't really remember what it was. And the one on the right is stamina regen, because it's fairly easy to find the stamina regen ring very early on in this game. But those are the basic elements of your health: stamina, ammunition, lantern, Soulflay charges, as well as active buffs. On the top right-hand side, that is, that 5,666. That is your number of souls, which in this game it's called Vigor, but it's pretty much the same thing. You pick it up from killing enemies. The more enemies you kill, the more you gain. And, you then use it to buy stuff and whatnot. Even though there's a couple of more currencies in the game, nothing really like premium currencies that you buy with real money. But there's a bunch of different currencies from doing multiplayer activities and stuff like that that you can also get in the game. I'm not really going to be getting into multiplayer on this guide because this is just a beginner's guide, okay? Now, on the bottom left-hand side, that is your consumables tab. So you'll notice that right now we have this cross-looking thing, and it says that I have 4 of them. That would be your... Estus flask equivalent, basically. So I use one of these, heals me up, and now I have 3. And if I go up to this thing, which is a Vestige, this is basically kind of like your bonfire equivalent, you can rest up, and you will recover all of your charges of whatever that thing is called. It's called a Sanguinatrix or whatever it is, but, now we have 4 charges again. That's the way that it goes. You'll also notice that resting up at the bonfire also recovers your ammunition, which if you look at the top left-hand side, it is now completely filled up, which is something that I really appreciate, because basically you get to use ammunition and you don't have to worry about, oh, I gotta go buy more ammunition from the vendor or something like that. No, it gets restored as you play through the game, and there are ways of getting more ammunition, which I will get into a little bit further ahead in the video as well. Now, the bottom left-hand side, besides just having your Estus thing, you can, assign a couple of more items in there, and you cycle through them using your D-pad left and D-pad right. You can cycle through a bunch of different items. The items that you put on there are customizable. They're called quick access items. Right now I have some Bryostone in there, which is some additional healing, and an ammunition pouch, which recovers your ranged attacks should it be necessary, but you can put whatever the hell you want in here. So, you kind of know how this works if you've played a Soulsborne game before, and if you haven't, it's not that complicated, really. You just choose whatever, consumable item you want to have on here, and it will get added. Like, I'll add these mana stone clusters, and you see that they now show up in there. Once you select the item that you want to use, you press X on your Xbox controller, or square if you're playing on a PlayStation controller. If you're playing on mouse and keyboard, I would recommend that you go and watch the key bindings to see what they do, because I really only play these games using controllers. Sorry, call me a pleb, call me whatever you want, I don't care. Anyways, now if you direct your attention to the bottom right-hand side, you'll see that we have 2 things in there, a hand and a lantern. Now, the hand represents the fact that I currently have a throwing hand equipped, and this basically means that if I press up on D-pad, it selects my ranged weapon, and then if I press L2 or left trigger, it is going to let me aim my weapon and throw it. If, on the other hand, you press down on D-pad, then you get access to your lantern, which has a bunch of more functionality that we'll get into a little bit later in the video. But yeah, basically you choose between using your throwing hand, or if you put a magic focus in here or something, that is going to be this thing that shows up. So like, for instance, if I go here and I equip the Searing Accusation, this is some type of like casting focus. You'll see that now shows up. Unfortunately, I can't really do anything with it because I don't really have any spellcasting stats. But that's the idea there. So you choose between your lantern, which is a fixture that you're always going to have, and whatever you happen to be using for ranged attacks, whether that is spells or a bow or a thrown weapon. That's pretty much how you do it. So it's up D-pad for your ranged stuff, down D-pad to go back to your lantern, and then left trigger or L2 are going to regulate how you use the item that you select on there. That is your UI. Now, let's talk about basic movement. I mean, this is fairly standard for third person. You know, your right stick moves the camera, or if you're playing mouse and keyboard, you can use the mouse to move your camera, and then your left stick or WASD are going to move your character. Now, you can also run. This is on the left stick. You just press down on the left stick, and your character is going to run. That consumes stamina, like I said. And you can also dodge by pressing circle or the B button, and that is going to dodge in whatever direction you want. Now, an important thing about dodging is that if you lock on to an enemy, your dodge is going to change. You can see that now we have the more Bloodborne style dodge. And if you press dodge button twice, you're going to go into a roll. So if you want to get some more distance, you just press dodge button twice. But just keep in mind that whenever you lock on to an enemy, your dodge is going to change. The dodge is very generous with invincibility frames. And on top of it, to give you an idea, you guys might think, man, that is a really, really generous dodge. This is just with medium encumbrance. If you pay attention to encumbrance on the bottom left-hand side above our stats, we are in medium encumbrance. I haven't even tried what heavy encumbrance looks like, but this is very generous. But yeah, you can make this even better by going all the way to light. And you might think to yourself, man, that's amazing. I'm going to love rolling in this game. Yeah, just wait until you're actually in a place where you can fall off. That becomes a problem real friggin' quick. So keep that in mind. If you're in a place that's like really high up and you can fall off, be very careful when you dodge. Be very situationally aware of where you are before dodging, because yeah, that's going to be important. Now, this game also has jumping, not in the same form as Elden Ring. In Elden Ring, you just press a button and jump. And here you have to do the more traditional Souls jump, so to speak, in which you run and then you press X or A, depending on which controller you are using, and your character does this little hop, which is just mostly for basic platforming, but you can do it pretty fast. Like, you can see that I almost don't even get a running start here. You're just like, whoop, whoop. So a little bit of practice, and you'll be able to get this jump going, like, really, really fast. Also, be very careful in situations where, you know, you have very little space to land, because if you run too much and you press jump, he's going to roll at the end of it. So keep that in mind. Not always, but sometimes you will roll at the end of the jump like that, and that can be really problematic. So practice your jumping a little bit, especially before doing any risky platforming. Otherwise, you're going to go ahead and get wrecked. Now, let's talk about some of the basic attacks. So attacking, again, fairly standard. As with most of these Souls-like games, you press your R1 or your right bumper. You do your light attacks. In the case of this sword, we can do like a 5 combo. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Different weapons will have different combos. Like, I'm actually using a spear mostly on this character, and that has like a 3 attack combo, give or take. Naturally, you also have your heavy attacks, which will be the right trigger or R2, depending on which controller you're using. And as you can see, in this case, it does a lunge. Again, different weapons will have different movesets, so keep that in mind. I'm just using a basic sword to give the most basic attack, and the heavy attack can be charged by keeping the button pressed. This increases the amount of damage that the attack deals, as well as the amount of stagger damage that the attack deals, which we'll talk more about, like posture damage and whatnot a little bit further ahead in the video. But just keep in mind, this increases your posture damage. Now, another attack that you have access to is going to be pressing both shoulder buttons, or L1 plus R1, and that is going to give you the kick. Kick is very important. You can kick people off of cliffs, and also kick deals a pretty decent amount of stagger damage, and it is also used to trigger down states on enemies that allow you to inflict grievous strikes. We'll talk more about that, but just be aware it is both of the shoulder buttons, or L1 plus R1, is going to give you access to kick. Now, an interesting thing that they decided to do in Lords of the Fallen as well is that pressing L1 plus R2 or a left bumper plus right trigger also gives you access to a unique move for each of the weapons. In this case, we get this double slash. It's usually a multi-hit move, so you press L1, R2 simultaneously. And there you go. You get this slash right here. This is going to change if you happen to swap into two-handed mode, which you can do by pressing triangle or Y button, depending on which controller you're on. Again, you get your regular attacks, you get your charged attacks. As a matter of fact, you can swap in and out of one-handed into two-handed whenever you want. Not really a big deal. And then that is going to make a different special attack, which in this case is just a big one-handed swipe. Okay, now, besides all that, you also have naturally your dodge attack. So if you dodge and press attack afterwards, that's going to do a special, not really a special attack, but it's a different animation. So keep that in mind. And you have your running attacks as well, right? So if you run and then you press R1, you're going to do this spinning slash. If you run and you press R2, it actually does a jumping attack. So running R2s are like jumping attacks for most of the weapons that I've played so far. And I've tried a hammer, tried spear, tried this sword. Most of them will be this type of jumping attack type of thing, which is a very good attack when you are just coming up to an enemy, smacking him right in the mouth with a running attack, and then potentially like dodging away. It's like a good hit and run tactic, in my opinion, if you're trying to face off against something that is very hard for you to deal with. But yeah, that's dodging and running attacks. Keep in mind, those animations are going to be different depending on, you know, which weapon you're going to be using and all of that good stuff. Now, let's talk about blocking and parrying, right? We have a shield right here. We can use the shield to block. So one of the things that I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to kill this guy because he's a spellcaster, so he's just going to annoy us. And the guy we want to actually fight is this dude right here. So blocking, you just hold down L1 or the left bumper, and you will see that whenever we block, we take a lot of that withered damage that I talked about before. Recoverable damage, so you can attack him afterwards to recover your health. So keep that in mind. Now, when it comes to parrying, basically all you got to do is block at the very last second. Notice how the animation was a little bit different. There was like some white sparks that came out. And if you parry enough times, you'll put him like in that down state right there that you saw. So let's try parrying again. Oops. Pay attention to that animation. Also listen to the sounds. There's distinct sounds for parrying. It can be somewhat challenging to hear when you're properly parrying an enemy, so you have to really get used to it. Now, another trick about parrying is you don't want to just like tap the button. You want to actually hold it because the animation takes a little bit to get set up. But as you can see, parrying will actually deal a significant amount of posture damage. You guys might be wondering, posture? What do you mean? If you take a look at the targeting reticule that is currently on our enemy, you'll see that it's got a dot in the middle and then it's got an outer circle to it. I'll try to zoom this in on editing so that you guys can see it better. But whenever we deal damage to his posture, like let me try and parry here, notice how that was like half of his posture gauge, right? If you completely diminish that posture to nothing, that is going to trigger the enemy to be like in a state where you can do a Grievous strike. The Grievous strike is, you know, like a finishing blow type of situation, right? And basically the way that you do it is whenever they go red from losing all of their posture, you go ahead and you hit them with the R1 in close proximity, and they get completely destroyed. Now, an important thing is there are many ways of triggering the posture damage. So I'm actually going to be punching this enemy in order to try and trigger the attack without killing him. Now notice how he doesn't have any posture, but it didn't trigger the down state. That's when you want to go ahead. He's got no posture. We're going to go kick him. Remember, kicking is with L1 plus R1, and that'll put him into posture mode, and then you can do your Grievous strike, which in this case, this was an unarmed one, but whatever. But yeah, that's how you do, you know, your Grievous strike, your posture damage on enemies, and all of that good stuff. This is going to be particularly important for bosses, so keep that in mind. Now, the game also has a backstab mechanic to it. Actually, I'm not sure if I should be using the spear. The spear might actually just one-shot people because this is my main weapon, and this is a very early area. Let's actually swap back to like a sword, like the broken sword. So one of the things that you can also do is if you encounter an enemy and he's unaware of your presence, you can lock onto him. You can go up behind him. And this is kind of like, if you remember Bloodborne backstabs, you can do that. So you can come up to the enemy, charge the attack, and as you can see, that puts him in a backstab state. And then you can, you know, do your Grievous attack and wreck his face. But yeah, so that's backstabbing, Grievous attacks, parrying, blocking, all of that good stuff, right? Now, let's talk about two-handing and dual wielding. Now, I already showed you guys that you can two-hand your weapons by pressing triangle or the Y button, depending on which controller you have currently equipped. And this, you know, you just get to two-hand the weapon. But you can also equip another weapon on your left hand, and now you're instantly in dual wield mode. And dual wield mode just completely changes the movesets of the weapons. So now you have two swords. Although I will say that a lot of weapons have a moveset similar to this, because I was actually testing out, oh, what would happen if I was to do two spears? And interestingly enough, they turned the spears into slashing weapons, which is a little bit weird. But if you do the heavy attack, it'll actually do like a piercing attack and whatnot, which is kind of nice. And always remember that even when you're dual wielding, you now also have access to that special attack that I talked about earlier, which is the left bumper plus right trigger, or L1 plus R2, which gives you this multi-hit attack with the two weapons, which is really good. I'm going to be swapping back to dual swords because I kind of feel like dual swords makes more sense for this particular moveset, but whatever. Just know that that moveset is available for whatever, and you don't just have to do swords. Like, I can even do flail if I want to, so right now I would have a sword in one hand, a flail in the other, and it just kind of works. And then at any point in time, you can also just press triangle or the Y button, and you can go into two-hand mode for your main weapon. So if you'd want your main weapon to be the sword, deal big meaty hits, you could do that, or you could just swap things around and have the flail be your main weapon, so that when you two-hand, you're two-handing the flail instead of two-handing the sword. And then when you go back to regular mode, you know, you have both weapons, which is pretty cool. And always remember that you can also block whilst doing this, and you can also parry whilst doing this. So if we go up to the enemies over here, we can go ahead and beat the crap out of this guy. Dual wielding, I think, is actually going to be fairly viable in this game, but do keep in mind I'm only like 10 hours in, give or take. But you can also parry, although parrying, it feels a little bit easier with shields. Also due to the fact that I'm kind of a bit of a noob when it comes to parrying. Come on, there we go. There's a parry right there. Let's see that again. Bro, it is easier with a shield. There we go, another parry. Now the parry, the riposte, or the Grievous strike, which is what they call it in this game, that is basically going to be done using whichever weapon you have on your main hand, which is the leftmost slot. So keep that in mind, you know, if you have a weapon that deals more damage, or in this case, if you have a weapon that does bleed, which this weapon does, you might want to consider which weapon is the one that's most important to me, and always keep that one on the leftmost slot, which basically is the one that is attributed to your main hand weapon. So that is the basics of two-handing, dual wielding, and doing crazy shenanigans with that. And remember, you can block. You can also do jumping attacks with it as well. Actually, no, you can't do the jumping attack. It just does this move instead. So there's different moves for your running attacks, whether you're doing them with the right trigger or the right bumper. But yeah, dual wielding, two-handing, all that good stuff. Now, let's talk about ranged attacks, which I kind of already touched up on, but let's hone in on that just a little bit more. Let me swap over to my main weapon now, just in case we actually need to kill stuff a little bit faster. But what you do is you press up on D-pad to go ahead and select whatever ranged weapon you happen to have. You target your enemies. Oh, they're already dead. We're going to have to reset this real quick. Forgot about that. But okay, so you're going to target your enemies after you press up on D-pad, and then you hold down your left trigger, and then you can either use right trigger or right bumper to shoot. It's not really a big deal. Notice that you can hold it to charge, which will deal more damage than just tossing it. Actually, that dealt about the same damage, but I believe that charging it will deal more stagger damage at least. Even though it doesn't deal that much stagger damage. No, it did do more damage, because like that last one was only like 119. But this is how you do like your ranged stuff, right? Spellcasting is going to be the same. And do remember, you can equip more than just one thrown weapon. So like I can have this, but keep in mind that this affects your weight. But basically what that means is whenever you press the button for your ranged attack, it'll let you just choose whichever weapon you want to use in order to attack your enemies. And this, you can consider this very much the same thing as spells. See, instead of equipping like the Bloody Hatchet, the Lacerating Knife, or the Short Javelin, you would equip different spells here. And then once you press L2, it would let you, L2 or left trigger, it would let you go ahead and select whichever one you want to use. So right now I have the Bloody Hatchet, right? But I can press X on Xbox controller or square on a PlayStation controller, and now I would have the knives. Now I can throw the knives instead. Or I could press the Y button or triangle, and now I'll throw javelins. Or I can press X or A, and now I go back to throwing these. With spells, basically what it would do is instead of you selecting the spell, whenever you press the button, it would instantly cast the spell, which allows you to basically have, I believe, up to 4 spells pre-selected. And then you can just cast 4 spells at the same time. Well, not at the same time, but you get it without pressing up and down on D-pad to select different spells. You can just go just like Fireball, and then, I don't know, bigger Fireball, or Heal, or Buff, or whatever. You guys get the idea. Right? Sorry, I haven't really had enough time to play like a spellcasting character. I'm actually trying one out right now. It's pretty fun. I'll tell you guys that. Now, another thing that you'll need to keep in mind is that there are specific mechanics around your lantern when it comes to combat. So, you can actually use your lantern to steal the soul away from your enemies, if that makes sense. So let me just kill this guy. Like I said, this guy's always annoying. And there are even specific enemies that require you to use the lantern. So on this case, I'm going to rip out this guy's soul. And now you can attack his soul directly, and that deals wither damage, which allows you to break him. And then you can do a finishing move with your lantern that deals a crap ton of damage, which is pretty cool. But to be honest, it's something that I haven't really done that often because my spear doesn't really deal that much posture damage. These enemies are just like super low level, so it's not really a problem. But you guys get the idea. You basically get to go ahead and steal their souls. Just get rid of this guy. You guys get to go ahead and steal their souls, and then you deal wither damage to them. And if you completely dish out all of their health gauge and wither damage, that enables you to do a special execution move. Like I said, that requires quite a bit of practice. See, because right there, I wasn't able to do it. And we're actually out of lantern charges right now. Now, we need to actually advance through here because there's a special enemy that I want to introduce you guys to, which has a very specific mechanic for lantern combat. Okay, so I think I cleaned up most of the enemies in the area. Now, if you guys pay attention, you'll notice that this particular enemy has a little blue orb next to his health gauge, and his health gauge is blued out. What that means is that he is pretty much going to be invulnerable. We can break him, but even if you break him, it doesn't mean anything because he has a parasite. So like I broke him, now I'm going to stab him. Doesn't matter. So, since he has that blue health gauge and all of that stuff going, you'll notice that he's got like this little blue tendril coming off of his back. Now, if we use our lantern, I'm actually going to remove the lock on. If we use our lantern, we press down on D-pad to make sure that we have the lantern selected, and then press the left trigger or L2. It is going to give us a glimpse into the Umbral Realm. Now, if you're already in the Umbral Realm because you died or because you needed to shift into the Umbral Realm for whatever reason, you'll be able to see this. You don't need to pull out your lantern to see it, but you'll be able to see that there's an enemy right there. Now, if you're in an Umbral Realm, you can just straight up attack that little dude behind him. But if you're in the Axiom Realm, which is where we are right now, we can't really target him. But we can drain him. See, the way that you do that is you make sure that the lantern aims towards him. You can be locked on to the enemy, but that makes it a little bit harder, so I would actually recommend removing lock-on if you're able to. and then just try to target the lantern directly at the little dude that's behind him. And then you're going to press on the R1 button or the right bumper, depending on which controller you're using. That is going to allow you to basically drain him. There. Once you do that, enemy goes back to normal, you can kill him. Sometimes bosses will also have parasites on them, so you'll have to, that'll be a mechanic that you'll have to deal with in boss fights as well. So, keep that in mind as you play through the game. If they have a little orb next to their health, or if their health is painted blue or whatever, that probably means there's a parasite attached to them. And you need to remove that by bringing out your lantern and then holding up the R1 or right bumper button. Sorry, trying to continuously think about Xbox inputs and PlayStation in. A little bit annoying. But anyways, that is how you do the soul grabbing with your lantern to remove the souls of your enemies, gain a little bit of breathing room, and potentially even dealing enough wither damage to trigger a down state, as well as removing parasites from enemies. But that's not all that you do with the lantern. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite features in this game, because it makes levels much more interesting to explore, is the fact that you get to explore the Umbral Realm when you use the lantern. But some players might be a little bit concerned when it comes to that stuff, because you might think, oh my god, how am I going to know if there's something important in the Umbral Realm that I need to go check out? One of the easiest ways of figuring that out is if you notice here there's a couple of butterflies or moths or whatever you want to call them. These indicate that there's something important here. Usually the sound will also shift whenever you're next to something important for the Umbral Realm. So you just need to pay attention to it. But whenever you see something like this, it's usually a fair chance that there's something there. So if we pull out our lantern... Oh! There's something in here that we can clearly interact with, and that is going to allow us to descend there, because, I mean, if we drop here, look at the spikes, you're going to die, right? But there might be something interesting over there that you might want to check out. So, you want to go ahead and go into the Umbral Realm and explore this place. Now, in order to shift into the Umbral Realm, you're going to bring out your lantern, then you're going to press the square button on your PlayStation or the X button on your Xbox, and you're going to shift into the Umbral Realm. Now, do remember, when you do this, you basically throw away one of your lives. So, if you die now, you're dead for good. There's no, oh, I get to live again in the Umbral. No, you are in the Umbral already. So keep that in mind. Now, the way that you interact with this is you're going to have to lock on to that target, and then you hold out your lantern, and you press R2 or right trigger. Now, these interactions differ from time to time. Sometimes you'll pull out platforms that you can go to. Other times you'll pull out these little skeleton things that work like bridges. But you are going to be using interactions like this in order to be able to navigate the world. So, if we keep exploring down here, we'll notice that there's a couple of more interesting things. Like right here, these butterflies mark, oh, this is your exit. There's a stairway. Not a stairway, a ladder that you can kind of climb up. Now, like I said, whenever you go to Umbral, enemies are going to show up, especially if you're in a location that has anything of importance. And this location does have one thing of importance that I want to show you guys. Let me just get rid of these enemies over here. They're going to keep spawning, so we have to be a little bit quick about what we're doing here. Now, an important thing is this statue here actually had an item. We can't interact with it anymore, but if you see a statue that looks somewhat like this, it's going to have something that you can lock onto. You lock onto it, you do the same thing where you throw out your thing. This does not actually use those charges whenever you're interacting with the environment. You can use this as many times as you want, but, you'll get items from these things. These are basically chests in the Umbral Zone. But another very important thing is every now and then you'll come across something that looks like this. Not exactly like this model, but, a model that will be like all whited out and it has like this little blue outline to it. These are called, what are they called? Umbral Stigmas. And Umbral Stigmas, you can lock onto them by pressing down on R3. And once you lock onto them, you are going to be able to press your left trigger plus right trigger. And it triggers like a memory type of thing. And you might be like, oh, I don't care about lore. This doesn't matter to me. I don't care, whatever. But whenever you trigger these things, they actually give you a specific resource for the first time that you trigger them. So whenever you see one of these Umbral Stigmas, make sure that you trigger it at least for the first time. Always, always, always trigger Umbral Stigmas the first time, because trust me, you're going to get a resource, and that resource is going to be important to acquiring gear later, which is specifically the reason why I came all the way down here in this guide to show you guys that. So remember, the lantern is also for solving puzzles, for exploring different, the different realms and all of that stuff. And now you might be wondering, okay, so imagine I don't have like a spot nearby, one of those vestiges that acts kind of like a bonfire. How do I come back from the Umbral Realm? And the way that you do that is you have to find something. I believe there's one of those statues around here somewhere. Yeah, it's over there. You're going to have to find a statue that looks like this. Now, I can only tell you of my experience so far in the game. There's usually enough of these statues that I wouldn't be scared of jumping into Umbral, because I know that some people are going to be like, oh, I jump into Umbral, then I'm going to be stuck there and enemies are constantly spawning. That's annoying. Yeah, but there's plenty of these statues, although these are one use per rest. After you rest, they reset and they'll come back. But until you rest, these statues are actually one use. So keep that in mind. But usually whenever you have to go Umbral, you're going to be finding these statues in a lot of places. Just go ahead, pick this up. But basically you use the statue, consumes the statue, and it brings you back to Axiom, the world of the living, and Bob is your uncle. But yeah, that's the basics of navigating through Umbral, the reasons why you might want to jump into Umbral, what you should pay attention to when it comes to Umbral. There's quite a few things. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you guys another mechanic that you can have with this. Let me just go ahead and run through this phase, because I want to get to a different spot. Because there's one more thing that you can do with your Umbral Lantern, and I want you to be aware of it. So there's an item that you can pick up as you play the game. Usually killing a boss will give you one of these items. But it is... Let me go ahead. It is an item that looks like... It's not this one. Do I even have any? Please tell me I have some. Here we go. Vestige Seed. So you're going to be finding these items every now and then throughout the world, or whenever you kill a boss or whatever. And you can use those to create a temporary bonfire. You can only ever have one of these bonfires active, which is why you'll understand if I'm not going to be using mine on here. But you can place these bonfires down whenever you see flowers like this. Now you'll notice on the bottom right-hand side that your lantern is like glowing, all excited. It's like, hey, there's something important here. And if you notice these little flower patterns, sometimes they'll be up against walls and stuff. And they'll be like in a corner somewhere. But in this case, they're right here. This is actually the tutorial where they teach you how this works. You hold out your lantern, and then you can press the Y button or the triangle button, and that is going to allow you to place a temporary vestige here, which basically acts like a bonfire. Just remember, you can only have one of these active at any given time. So when you place a new one down, it is going to replace your currently active one. It's basically like a temporary checkpoint, but you can only ever have one of them active at any given time. But yeah, those are your lantern mechanics. The next couple of things that I would like to tell you guys about is gear. So when it comes to gear, this is fairly simple. If you look now to the top left-hand side, you'll see that we have a place where we put our weapons. This is right hand, this is left hand. So that's just the way that it goes. And then the third one is where you place your ranged stuff. So right now I have throwing hand because I use throwing weapons. Namely, I just use the bloody hatchets. In here, you'll equip either your weapons, or if you have one of these things, you can equip your spells, which I only have one spell called Sanctify. But, you'd be able to equip all 3 more spells in here. So that's kind of like how that would work. Then you have your armor. And by the way, armor in this game is very important. Like, I cannot stress enough how much it seems to reduce damage more so than is usual. At least for me, that's the vibe that I got. As a matter of fact, using more armor means that whenever you block, despite the fact that this shield says it only blocks like 38% or whatever, having more armor reduces the amount of withered damage that you take when you block and parry. So keep that in mind. I'm going to be shooting for playing medium most of the time. But, you know, if you guys want to play light or whatever, do whatever you want. And here you have your jewels. So you have a spot for a charm and 2 rings. Your quick access items, all of that stuff. And keep in mind that weapons, very much like in other Souls-likes, are going to have scaling, which is pretty much the same. You can see that this weapon scales D with strength and C with agility. Basically, the closer you get to A, the better. Usually above A, there's a letter, which is S. So things will go like E, D, what do you go from? E, D, C, B, A, S. With S being the most powerful scaling. So this weapon is clearly a dexterity scaling, agility scaling weapon with a little bit of strength scaling. So that's kind of like how that works. However, in this game, I would actually recommend you to heavily invest in vitality early on, because as you can see, despite the fact that I have like 19 agility, the scaling, which is C on this weapon, is only giving me like 18 more damage, which really is not that much. So early in the game, I would recommend go vitality and just upgrade your weapons, and that will be where most of your damage will come from. Later in the game is probably when, you know, the actual scaling is going to kick in. But just be aware different weapons are going to have different scaling. So like you see this sword that I have here, this is going to scale C with agility. And weapons also have special properties. So if you look below the scaling there, below strength, agility, radiance, and inferno, you'll notice that we have a couple more things. That is, the one that this weapon has is bleeding, which is 80. Then you have some kind of like holy debuff that you can do. There's fire, there's poison, assuming there's frost. And I don't know what the other one is below the fire. So I don't know what's going on there. But yeah, tons of different elements and stuff that weapons can have. I haven't really gotten to explore all that stuff, but this is mostly just a beginner type guide anyway. I just wanted to show you guys the scaling and all of that stuff, right? Now, if you look at our character stats, these stats are also fairly basic if you've played any of these games before. You have your strength, which is for strength weapons, so big, meaty weapons like, say, for instance, this hammer over here, the Faithful Bludgeon, which scales C with strength, and I'm assuming that scaling is going to increase significantly as you go ahead and upgrade the weapon. Agility is going to be more, you know, fast type weapons like these daggers. Well, no, these daggers are actually strength and inferno. Good God, that's a strange weapon. But, you know, this flail, for instance, scales with agility on a D. So, you know, depending on the type of weapon, some weapons scale with strength, some weapons scale with agility, whatever. That's kind of like the way that it goes. Increasing those stats will basically give you more damage in the chosen weapons, with the added bonus that, according to what Cowboy told me, agility also increases the amount of ammunition that you have available. So, for instance, if you look at my gauge, you'll notice I have a ton of ammo. If you start playing the game and you're like, wow, Rurikhan has a ton of ammo, I have almost nothing. According to Cowboy, that is agility. I was wondering if it was agility or if it was just like leveling up, but, you know, that's what I know so far about that. Then when it comes to endurance, endurance works pretty much like it did in Dark Souls 1. So it governs both the amount of stamina that you have and the amount of weight that you can carry, which is a very, very good stat. Vitality influences how much health you have. Radiance is basically the faith type spells in this game. So spells like healing and buffing and also ranged faith spells that deal damage. Those will all be governed after Radiance. Inferno is kind of like Pyromancy, so it governs all types of fire damage when it comes to fire damage spells. And there's 1/3 spellcasting type that uses both of those stats, Radiance and Inferno, which is called Umbral Spellcasting. But I haven't really done a whole lot of Umbral Spellcasting, so, you know, it is what it is. Your encumbrance, this should be pretty much a no-brainer. The lower your encumbrance is, the better your stamina regeneration is going to be. The better and more generous your dodges are going to be and all that stuff. Medium feels very playable, so I'm going to stick with medium for now. And heavy, I haven't really tested it out yet, so, you know. And then finally, one last thing that I would like to bring up is the Tincts. You guys will be like, Tincts? What the hell is this? Let me see if I can get some light on here. These lights are going to They're going to kind of like mess with us. So let me see if I can actually get to a place that is potentially a little bit friendlier with the light so that I can show you guys what these do. But Tincts is basically a way to customize the look of your character by changing the color of your armor, which in my opinion is really cool. I think the light is a little bit more neutral around here. It's still a little bit warm, but it'll give you guys like an idea of what your armor can look like. So if you go over here to Tincts, you can select individual armor pieces and paint them. So notice how we swapped over to Ice Grip on our chest plate and it changed the color. You can also unequip it and it goes back to default coloring. You can put Pridebound, which is like this black and reddish type of hue. And you have Forsworn, which is a more brown-green type of hue. And you can color different armor pieces different colors. So like I could color just the arms, and then I can go to legs and I can color the legs different colors. So it's very interesting, and it's going to give you guys a different dimension to all that Fashion Souls. And there's a bunch of these that you can collect, especially if you engage in multiplayer stuff, because multiplayer is going to have special currencies that you get for either helping other players out or hunting players down that are going to be giving you different looks for your armor. But all these 3 ones that I got, these were just like playing through the game regularly, so you don't even need to engage in multiplayer at all. But yeah, that's tinctures, which will also allow you to kind of customize the look and feel of your character, which is pretty cool. But anyways, this guide's already way longer than I intended, as per usual. Hopefully this helps some of you guys out getting started with Lords of the Fallen. If there's anything that you feel I've forgotten that you think is important, please do mention that in the comment section below to help out your fellow Iron Breakers that might be jumping into Lords of the Fallen. But for now, that is going to be it. Thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe, peace out.